Kelly and I have chickens. Our grandkids love the chickens. We have lots of eggs around the house, and we run lots of food through those chickens. Chickens have been on my mind lately because I watch those things and I have the scrambled eggs and I think how useful those chickens are. And then I go out there and feed them and I see them squabbling and racing to the corn and pecking each other's eyes out. And I think, wait a minute, chickens are accidentally useful. They're useful because they can't help it. They just lay eggs, and if we find them, we can use them. That's different than humans. Humans are never accidentally useful. If we're useful, it's because we decided to be useful and acted in a way that was useful. So let me step away from this thing about chickens accidentally being useful and humans intentionally being useful and drill down on something that just occurred to me, and that is that this might be the most important time in history to figure out a way to be useful because of AI. Artificial intelligence is changing the world in terms of what it is that we do as humans to be useful. And those of us in the trades can all collectively sort of heave a sigh of relief and pat ourselves on the back and say, wow, I'm getting more useful every day because of the things that I accomplish with my hands and with my knowledge and with my experience and with my tools. Probably that's true. Probably AI is not going to be as fundamentally a disruptor for those of us who build things. You know, the in-place mass production of one-of-a-kind items, that's what construction is, and that sort of crowds AI out of the equation. But there's plenty of us who have jobs that are threatened by AI, and we'll be asking ourselves in the future, how do I become useful in new ways? Now, I've done lots of videos about being useful, how to be more productive, how to be a good job foreman, how to get a raise at work, how to establish systems. I mean, that's all part of being useful. But let's talk now about what it means to be useful in the interpersonal context, because whatever work works out to be, at home and in your relationships are where the usefulness component of being human is going to translate into happy and not just dollars. So understanding that usefulness in employment translates to dollars, which is a benefit for ourselves. In my opinion, the larger and more high-powered application of usefulness is usefulness in relationship. And I don't just mean that you're useful because you can pat somebody on the shoulder and say, oh, I'm sorry you're having a bad day. Although sometimes that's spectacularly useful, I'm talking about useful in terms of the ability to project yourself inside of another person's life, inside of another person's pain, inside of another person's joy, and share in that, either by lightening it, in the case of the pain, or recognizing and validating and feeling joy as a result of their joy. That's useful. And chickens never do that. Chickens only race to get there first. Now we all do that. I mean, that's competition. That's capitalism. That's exploiting opportunities to manipulate the people around you to get the goodie out of the Oreo before somebody else cracks it open. But that's not the useful that is going to change your stars in terms of the satisfaction you feel in your life, in the way that you live. So as with so many other aspects of what it means to be human, we never do anything that we don't want to do. That statement almost stands on its feet, doesn't it? We almost never do anything or anything well that we don't want to do. So if we want, if being more useful is what the end goal is, then learning to want to be useful is the way to get there. So we have to cultivate the desire to do these things. Now let's push away for just a minute that we have to wait for the motivation to do something. Waiting for motivation to act is a damaging myth. If we wait until the stars line up perfectly to do any good thing, whether it's a good thing to make money, a good thing to maintain your automobile, a good thing to clean the house, or a good thing to sit down with a teenage son and say, listen, I don't want to just lecture you, man. I want you to talk to me about what's going on in your life. And then if you wait to be motivated to do that, guess what? That boy's going to leave the house before you ever have that conversation. So part of what it takes to become truly useful is learning to stop waiting to be motivated to do that good thing and instead act. Stop waiting and act. So continuing just a little further on this myth of motivation, let's spend less time thinking about whether we feel like doing something and more time thinking about the future. Let's go back to the AI thing. Now, there are plenty of us who could feel real urgency and anxiety about where is AI going to end up relative to what I bring to the party. Well, we're going to think about that, and we're going to be motivated to maybe act if we can get off the couch just because we know we've got to. But if we apply that to some of the trickier aspects of our life that bear closer on what joy depends on, like, gosh, how do I forgive something that was done to me? How do I become a peacemaker? Well, if we wait for the motivation to become a peacemaker, probably we're never going to have peace. But rather, if we take a longer view, maybe from an eternal perspective, but even just from a 10 or 20 years down the road perspective, and say, wait a minute, my life is going to be less if I don't find a way to rebuild that bridge. Okay, good first step. Beginning of motivation, beginning of acting, and then take some small action. Whatever it is that looms, becoming useful depends on learning to take small steps instead of waiting until we can take a big leap. Chickens don't do that. They leap for that grape that dropped into their pen out of the garbage bucket. They leap for that because they're in competition with the other people around them. But you are only in competition with whatever voice it is inside of you that's stopping you from rebuilding a bridge. That's what we're in competition with. And we usually don't leap to that end. We usually take some baby steps, some hesitant, gentle, vulnerable baby steps, because doggone it, we want the future to be better. This hinges on learning to love your neighbor as yourself. What a concept. So what are tactics? What are tactics? How about this? You start determining, I'm not going to make it through this next week without going out of my way to be useful for someone. Maybe you drive by on the road and there is a mom with a car full of kids and a flat tire. That's an easy one. You pull off. You don't second guess, oh my gosh, what if I'm putting myself at risk? No. You can recognize in the moment when someone alongside the road is someone you can take a chance on. Now, sometimes you can't. But if you take that step and then recognize how you feel after you do that, and you drive away saying, man, it felt good to be useful. Maybe it is, maybe it's your son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter's homework assignment. Maybe it would be easier to sit there and continue to read that book. But you go, no, wait, I want to be useful right now. Bam, the book goes shut. Come over here, Rusty. Show me what you're working on. That's useful. And it took that act that even though you didn't want to, you determined that the reward was going to be what you needed in this quest to become a grandpa that somebody's going to miss when they bury you. That's part of what's going on. Become a human that brings joy when you come into the room and sorrow when you leave it, rather than 180 degrees out. Regret when you come into the room and relief when you leave it. Nobody wants to be that. This is the thing that Kelly and I have gotten from watching A Christmas Carol. Every year, we watch 2 or 3 versions. George C. Scott is my favorite. That song in some of the versions, thank you very much, that's the nicest thing that anyone's ever done for me in dying. Now, who would say that Scrooge wasn't useful to Scrooge, and only to Scrooge? So all of this conversation about preparing for what AI might bring to the party or your party, or if you might need to find a new party, yes, do that. If chickens had a brain at all, they would do that. And then they would race in that new setting to get what they wanted to get. But nobody mourns a chicken when it's dead. Nobody mourned Scrooge until Scrooge learned to be truly useful to Bob Cratchit and everybody else. So maybe that's a way to remember this. We're coming up on the Christmas season. And soon enough, I will commercialize that in giving you my Christmas list and the things of mine that I wish you would buy, like the form. Yes, see, there we go. Hypocrite. But as we come into this fall season and we watch A Christmas Carol, we think, How did Scrooge make the leap from being just another chicken in the flock who happened to get more of what all the chickens wanted to being a fully useful human? It's the road to happiness. It's the crux of the Sermon on the Mount. It's the crux of Marcus Aurelius, the Stoics. It's the crux of what Confucius taught in the Tao, how it's pronounced. All of these people were bringing the same ideas about morality and ethics because it's the way to become useful. And I'll just wrap this up with quoting poorly Marcus Aurelius' beautiful quote where he said, there's a type of a man who will do you a favor and expect you to do him a favor back. And there's a type of a man who will do you a good turn, and he may not expect that you do the quid pro quo payback, but he'll never forget that he did the favor. And then he said there's the type of man who goes about his business, goes throughout his life, goes throughout his day, doing good for those around him as naturally and unself-consciously as a grapevine bears its fruit, as a hunting dog pursues its prey, as a bee lays in stores for the winter, in an unaffected, unpresuming, completely natural, and then I will add, truly useful way. Now, not many of us are born that kind of a man. All of us can read about those kind of men and women. All of us recognize those fully human humans when they cross our path. And all of us can aspire to choose to act, at least occasionally, and perhaps more often, day by day, in that way. Thank you for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.